What does a police officer, a mechanic, and a doctor all have in common? They're all investigators. They're all investigating basically a crime scene. In the case of your doctor, you go in to see him and he starts asking you questions. What did you do? How did you hurt yourself? Where do you feel the pain? When does it hurt? He's gathering evidence. You're the witness and the victim in this case, and maybe the suspect because you caused your own injury or somebody else. Anyway, so he's gathering evidence so that he can come up with a diagnosis. He can build a case to support a diagnosis. When you witness a crime, you're the witness. A police officer may take a statement from you, and he's trying to gather evidence, and he's trying to gather as detailed and specific evidence as he can. What did you see? What did you hear? Who was there? What time was it? And those kind of things. And when you go to see your mechanic because your car is broken, it's the same thing. He wants to know why you're there, what happened, when did it start happening, what did you see, what did you feel, what did you hear, what did you smell. He's trying to accumulate as much evidence as possible from your senses to help him pinpoint what the problem is with your vehicle. Your vehicle is the victim in this case. So if you're going to do your own maintenance on your vehicle, do your own repairs, well, now you've become the investigator and the star witness. So there's steps to take in doing your own diagnosis, just like any investigation. If you follow a procedure, if you come up with a plan and follow those steps, you can help narrow down what the problem is and get to a diagnosis. And the more detail, the more evidence you can gather, the better your diagnosis is going to be. So the first step, as we're talking about here, is gathering evidence. What did you observe that led you to believe that there's an issue with your vehicle? Was there something you heard that wasn't quite right, like a knocking or a grinding, squealing, a low hum? These things are all these sounds mean something. Now, one thing with sound with your car, it's a great indication that something's wrong. It's a very misleading indication of what's wrong because it can be so hard to pinpoint where the sound is coming from. You're sitting in the car and you think it's coming from the front passenger side wheel. It might be, but it's hard to tell. Feeling is more important than sound. I mean, they're both important, but what did you feel? If you felt some kind of vibration, if you felt the wheel pulling, the vehicle was pulling from side to side one way or another, or there was a shake in the steering wheel, if you felt that the car wanted to stall when you stepped on the gas, these are all things you feel, and that's probably the most important sense. So I'll give you an example. So in this case with feeling, if you're feeling a vibration in the steering wheel, it's probably the front end of the car. More likely than not, there's something in the front end, and more likely than not, it's something in the drive line of the car. Especially if it happens when you are stepping on the gas or letting off the gas or hitting the brake and you feel that shake, you're looking at the front. If you're feeling a vibration or a shake or something in your seat, there's a much better chance that's coming from somewhere in the back end of the car. So these are the kind of things, the more specific you can get, whether you're going to your mechanic or doing it yourself, the more evidence you can gather and the more specific you can be, you're going to save yourself money, maybe thousands of dollars, because if you're avoiding just replacing parts randomly, then you can save money. The next thing is smell. So if you smelt burning rubber, you could have a belt that's going. If you smelt burning oil, you could be low on oil or you're leaking oil. More likely, if you're smelling burning oil, it's leaking on your exhaust manifold or something. There's an oil leak that's hitting something hot. If you can smell antifreeze is a very distinct smell. And when you're low on antifreeze or it's leaking a bit and it's steaming, then you'll smell that and you'll never forget that smell. Or if you've ever smelt an electrical burn, that's something as well that you never forget. So maybe a bad ground wire caused some over resistance and a fuse popped, and you might smell that. Did you see something that made you think there's a potential issue? Like you're backing out of your garage in the morning and you notice there was a puddle under the car that never was there before. Maybe you've got a transmission fluid leak or oil or coolant. Maybe it's just condensation from your air conditioner was running when you parked the car, but something to check, you know. Did you see an engine light or another warning light come on? That's a pretty clear indication that something's going on. And if you have a scanner, well, now you've got a fault code in there somewhere. You can plug in the scanner and that'll get you even closer to a diagnosis. Was your temperature gauge or your oil pressure gauge off? If your oil pressure was low or your temperature was high, and these are things when you're driving, you got to look at and notice so you know what normal is, so you know when they're not normal. And these are the kind of things that if you do notice it and you can stop before you do damage, that's really good. Even a low tire or a tire that's worn a bit funny, you know, if you're driving and you're getting a bit of a shake or a wobble, one of the first things to do is look at your tires and see if you have uneven wear or a low tire. If it's winter time and the car is shaking and it wasn't shaking the last time you drove it, there's a good chance you got a buildup of snow or ice inside one of your rims. That happens very common in the wintertime. So, you know, I see people pull over on the side of the road checking their car because they think something horrible is wrong because it feels terrible, and it could be just that. Did you notice your headlights seemed a bit dim? That could be your alternators going or your batteries low. So as I mentioned earlier, what your mechanic is doing is he's calling on your 4 out of your 5 senses to help determine what might be going on in your car. So that's what this is about. Your eyes, your ears, your sense of smell, and your sight are all going to help you with the initial diagnosis of your car. So step 2 is gathering more evidence. So now you've gone through your senses. Well, now it's a when, where, how, who, more of the detective's kind of stuff. He might ask you taking a statement at a crime scene. So when did you notice the issue? Has this been happening every time you drive the vehicle? Is it intermittent? Does it happen when you hit the brakes? Does it happen when you accelerate? Or is it when you're making a right or left turn, or going around a curve? Does the sound go away, or does the sound get louder? You know, that might lead to wheel bearings. Is it at a certain speed that you feel a chatter in your steering wheel, or is it when you're at a speed and you have a load on, meaning you're accelerating, pressing on the gas, and you feel a vibration as soon as you let off the gas? There's no more vibration. That is an indication of possibly a CV axle or drive shaft or something like that that's worn, a universal joint on your drive shaft. It might not mean much to you, but the more detail you can give to a mechanic, the closer he can get to the problem. And if you're doing it yourself, you gather this evidence and then you can use that to do step 3, which is research. So once you've gathered as much evidence as you can about what the issue is, now you got to start researching. What can you find out about these specific symptoms? So if you are getting warning lights on your dash and you've got a scanner, well, by all means, connect that scanner and check for fault codes. And you might get a obscure number on the fault code, but you can plug that in somewhere on the internet and find out what that code means. And that'll lead you down a path that might get you a little closer to a solution. If you don't have a scanner, you can go to an auto parts store, and some of them will have a scanner there. They'll, for a fee, they'll scan your car and give you the results of that. Could be very helpful. Scanners aren't that expensive though. For $150, you can get a decent one, usually something even specific to your car. If you don't have one and you don't want to go to auto parts store, no problem. Next thing for me, I would do is go on YouTube and start searching. Try to search for your vehicle, make, model, year. You want to get as specific as you can, the engine size, things like that. But initially, you might not be able to nail it down that far, but initially start with the symptoms for your vehicle, make and model and year. And if you're noticing coolant leaking under your car or something like that, well, type in most common coolant leaks for vehicle X, or if you're getting a vibration, vibrations happen in any car. So if it's a shake or vibration, maybe type in most common causes of shakes and vibrations on vehicles. And just start doing research like that. If you can get more and more specific and kind of nail it down to what you're noticing and then match it up to your car, and corroborate it with your evidence, you can get very close. In most cases, you can get to where you need to be. And the next thing would be to talk to someone. If you have someone that's a mechanic or handy in auto repairs, pick their brain a little bit. I have a family member that's a heavy diesel mechanic, so he's working on like transport trucks, big rigs. He started it, at a dealership, and he's worked on thousands of vehicles, and they all run on the same principles. So I've found every time I've gotten stumped with an issue and I run it by him, it always amazes me how he comes up with something I hadn't even thought of, because he's got that experience. He's had those frustrations of chasing a problem and not being able to pinpoint it until he's dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and then he finds it. And sometimes that's the solution you need that you haven't tried, and it can save you a lot of time and a lot of money. So once you've done those steps, the fourth step is to make a determination. You've gathered all your evidence, you've done all your research. So what's your game plan? So based on the evidence gathering in your research, now you got to narrow it down to your best ability. So can you pinpoint the issue 100% or even 80%? Well, congratulations. I'd say at that point, it's time to go order yourself some parts. Make sure you have the tools you need to do the job. And a great way to make sure you have the tools is if you can find a video of someone else doing that same repair on the same vehicle. And, some of these guys have $30,000 of tools. You can improvise. You see what they're using and think of what you have, and okay, I can use this instead of that, or I can try this. But you might find a specific, like a torque socket or something that you need for sure. And make sure you get that stuff before you start the job. So you have all your parts and tools there before you start taking things apart. If you can only get to maybe 60-40 or 50-50 chance that your theory will fix your problem, maybe you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 possibilities. If that's the case, then start with the lowest cost, most likely culprit, and go from there. Mechanics are not only like investigators by how they gather evidence, they also use a lot of other tools that investigators use, like profiling and behavioral science. So for a vehicle, these things are much easier because vehicles are more alike than people are. So if 90% of, say, early 2000 E46 chassis BMWs develop an oil leak from the oil filler reservoir, then that's what they're going to look at first. And there's actually software and programs that mechanics use that, based on fault codes, will tell them that 80% of the time replacing part X will solve the problem. So they might just start there and just replace that part, and they got an 80% chance that they fix it. And that's where it can cost you money, because a little bit further digging, going a bit deeper, you might find that that wasn't really the problem. It was something else. They don't have the benefit of that extra time. They're on the clock and they gotta get something done. So they're gonna, if they get an 80% chance of fixing it by replacing a certain part, they're going to do it. So part of the issue is they're using a scan tool. They're finding the default code. They're finding the most likely cause, and they're replacing that part. Sometimes the scanning tools and the codes can be a bit misleading. So they might lead you to a part that's broken, but they might not lead you to the root cause of why that part failed. And that's what you have to do. What you can do or need to do as the owner and the do-it-yourselfer to get to the root cause and make sure that the part that failed doesn't fail again by replacing whatever caused it to fail. So an example of that is my X5, the air compressor that controls the suspension on the car. I blew the fuse on it, and replacing the fuse fixed the problem. The compressor worked again. But the cause of the fuse blowing was because there was moisture getting into the air compressor, and then the valves that release and capture air, there's a valve on there. It was seizing and freezing shut. And so when it was cold weather, it froze and it caused extra resistance, and it'd blow the fuse. So I could replace the fuse and it would work for a while, and then we get a cold day and a wet day and pop goes the fuse again. So yeah, a fuse is a cheap and easy thing, but it's not fixing the problem. So digging a little deeper can save you some money, and it can save you some frustration. That's diagnoses in a nutshell. There's, in every situation, whether it's suspension, whether it's heating and cooling, whether it's oil leak, electrical problem. They're all different avenues that go much deeper than the surface that I'm scraping here. This is to get you in the ballpark and looking at a method of drilling down into what specific problem you have. So there are very detailed videos on YouTube for specific problems. So once you've gone through your evidence gathering and your research and just keep drilling down into the direction you've gone, you'll find your problem. And even if it's a bit frustrating, it takes a little while, it's still going to be less expensive than going to a mechanic. And if you can't get to there, if you're not comfortable with fixing the problem, at least you've done a lot of research to help your mechanic find the problem. So the next video in this series will lay out strategies for finding the right parts for your vehicle and where to order them from. You can find parts really cheap, and they might work for a little while. They might work for a good long time, but they also might not work at all. And that's the really frustrating part. When you change a part on your car and you assume that the new part works and you still got a problem, and now you're digging into other areas because you think you misdiagnosed it when the actual part you put on is no better than the one you took off. So finding the right parts, making sure that they fit your car properly, because small variances in years, in engine sizes and drivetrains, whether you got front wheel, rear wheel, all-wheel drive, all these things, all these little things make a difference. That's why if you go to Napa or CarQuest or Canadian Tire or someone, and they're asking you a million questions about what engine your car has and what package it has, they're trying to make sure they get you the right part. When you're just trying to get wiper fluid, it's a bit of an annoying thing. But anyway, that's what that video is going to be about, and I hope you tune in for that. If you're interested in basic tools for fixing your vehicle or how to safely lift your vehicle to work on it, check out my previous videos in this series, and please like and subscribe and comment. I love to hear what you have to say about this. Thanks.